morning sun shines on the gleaming hide of a muscular ranch horse. The aroma of bacon and coffee drifts from the wood cook stove at a cow camp. Silver spurs jingle as the men and women of the West get set for another day in the saddle. From the heart of Canada's finest ranching country, this is the Spirit of the West with rancher and horse trainer Hugh McLennan and his collection of music, poetry, and conversations with the folks who live and work with horses and cattle in the Spirit of the West.
The line from Brett Kissel's song comes to mind when I think of a lot of longtime ranchers and cowboys we've known. The line is, "Tough times don't last, tough people do." He even gave us a couple of t-shirts with those words on them. A great example of that was a much-loved rancher and hunting guide. He lived in some of the most rugged country you can imagine. His name was Glen Kilgour, and he was also a colorful storyteller. Today you'll hear part of a kitchen table conversation we had with him before he rode across the Great Divide, including this story about adopting an orphan lamb.
So I said, yes, I'd take the lamb. Well, this day I thought I'll put it in a gunny sack, you see, and carry it a horseback. And I was riding a colt at that time.
That could be a recipe for a wreck. And the Rangeland News looks at, of all things, agriculture on Mars.
Experts say the crew would have to grow most of their food, but what happens if a crop-eating, destroying insect pest ends up hitchhiking on the ship?
As if we didn't have enough to worry about, Gary. Well, the one and only Baxter Black talks about something dear to our hearts: saving the West.
Saving the West almost always entails eliminating any type of private enterprise like cattle or timber or mining or fast food franchises.
And in the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight, a much-loved Western classic.
Not a horse is feeling snorty. Not one horse is acting sporty. In the spring, the brooch was full of buck and ball.
On the Irvin Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training Files, some things to consider when you're taking your horse way beyond his comfort zone for the first time. And the late Glen Kilgour describes the strangest buck-off he's ever witnessed after Jared Rogerson pries the lid off of this one with something we call soil, or silt, or clay. And it's a big part of a rancher's life, known simply as
dirt is what this land's made of. Work is what this ranch is made of. No amount of money can buy it. No amount of money can buy it. Hurt is what them colts put on me. Curse is my response immediately, and sometimes I don't know why. No amount of money can buy. It's a hard, hard life, but we got what we came for, and there is no one reason why. No amount of money can buy this dirt. Flirt is what she does with me, and it works. She's got a good hold on me, and no amount of money can buy. No amount of money can buy. Shirts, we give them off our backs, I'm sure, 'cause out here we do it like that. There's a feeling that you can't deny. It's something no amount of money can buy. It's a hard, hard life, but we got what we came for, and there is no one reason why. No amount of money can buy this dirt. Dirt is where the best roads lead. Dirt, it's how I know I'm really free, and I wouldn't trade this way of life for anything. It's a hard, hard life, but we got what we came for, and every day is a miracle, like the green, green grass that grows up out of. It's a hard, hard life, but we got what we came for, and there is no one reason why. No amount of money can buy. There's no amount of money that can buy this dirt.
a whole lot of songs end with the line, "You can grab a shovel," that's for sure. We were sitting around the kitchen table at Darrell and Nancy Peterson's ranch house overlooking the Peace River, and after a wonderful breakfast with our friends Glen and Claudette Kilgour, Glen started telling priceless stories.
And we came to the riverbank, and on this riverbank, Bill was in the lead and I was behind this outfit of horses, and we come to a very steep little hill going down this thing. It was in the winter, and there was places that there was a lot of snow, but this bank was so steep and that it was blowing bare. It was more or less bare, but there was a trail down there, and we started down this trail, and we went about, I would say, over halfway down, and I look ahead and I see Bill's saddle getting up on a horse's neck. I watched this for a little while, and finally I yelled at Bill as loud as I could. I said, "Bill, you better get off and lead this horse down the hill." And Bill looks ahead and then he looks behind, but he's a cowboy, and he's not going to get off if it's not necessary, you see, so he rides it to the bottom of the hill. Well, we get down just about, I'm going to say about 3 or 4 steps from the bottom of this bank down to the flat. Here this horse bogs his head, and he really gets at Bill, and Bill's up there and doing really good. Now, Bill is an older man, you see. He's in his 60s. He's fitting a really good bronc ride, and he gets to the bottom, and then this horse ducks around quick like that on a big flat, and the snow is really deep down there, about this deep. And Bill loses him, and he just goes up in the air like this, really good, and then he starts down head first like that. And Bill lands in this snowbank, and he starts disappearing from sight like this, and Bill has always repaired his chaps, and then he has never completed the fixing, you see, so the bottoms are open like that. Anyway, in he goes like that, in this snowbank. And then one of these chaps folds over this way, and the other one folds this way, and Bill disappears from sight. Out of there just chugging and blowing and spluttering, and he says, "And you'd laugh if I was killed." He said, in all the buck-offs I've ever seen, that was the most spectacular buck-off I ever did see. Yeah. Wow.
Well, Glen at that breakfast table shared some memories of another great cowboy who rode across the Great Divide a few years ago, Bill Bagley, when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. Back when Nancy and Darrell Peterson were still running a fine cattle operation that was once part of the mighty South Peace stock farms across the river from Fort St. John, Billy and I had stopped in for breakfast on our way home from doing a show with Tom Cole and friends the night before. And back then, Glen and Claudette Kilgour were still with us, and the name of an Alberta cowboy who's kind of a legend in circles he rode in came up, Bill Bagley.
Bill Bagley, he had a thing, he put his hand, he carried a loop on the back, hung on the back strap, or the cinch, the ring on the back, and he would push his arm in there when he rode. When he got old, he did this. And I remember telling Joe Bargett, lived south here. Joe had bucking horses all the time out of Cremona for years and years, and Joe's dead now too, but I was sitting on the rails in a horse sale down here in Dawson Creek one time, and I said to Joe, Bill Bagley had that thing that he put his arm in back there, and I said, I think it would be all right. It seems to me like you could keep yourself down in a saddle, you see, with this thing. And then I knew someone else, and they had a strap in the front, and they rode with it. And Joe says to me, "Well, anymore," he says, I'd have to have a strap on every corner of the saddle. No, you think about Bill now. You think when you start getting loose in them saddles, if you had a hand down here, how you could pull yourself back in that saddle. This thing fits right in that back ring, and you just slip your arm in it. Leave it big enough that if you got bucked off, your arm would come out of it, you know. But Bill just grabbed that and pulled himself. But he rode bucking horses all his life.
Yeah. Glen will recall the last time he was bucked off. After this neat song, now we opened up with a song called Dirt. And Jim Reeder wrote one about something that places like ours probably couldn't do without.
God ever made was an itty bitty piece of string. It's no expense, you can tie it to a fence or almost anything. But you can close a gate or any kind of freight right up in double time. The best darn tool in the world is bale twine. Well, it's yellow, it's orange, it's round, it's as strong as steel. Pound for pound, it's like spare change that hangs around. You know you're gonna use it sometime, bale twine. Up a mountain trail when her spring done broke in half. So I jacked her up in that empty trail, looked around, said what the heck. So I tied that spring to the box real tight and hoped she'd stay in line. 50 miles back to town I'd bale it twine. It's yellow, it's orange, it's round, it's as strong as steel. Pound for pound, it's like spare change that hangs around. You know you're gonna use it sometime, bale it twine. Pull a load, or rig a shank for that bull that's rank and pull him by the nose. You can tie a door, hold the floor, and keep your tailgate snugged up tight. The best darn tool in the world is bale and twine. It's yellow, it's orange, it's round, it's as strong as steel. Pound for pound, it's like spare change that hangs around. You know you're gonna use it sometime, bale and twine. You know you're gonna use it sometime, bale twine.
That's only a few of thousands of uses for that, but it does show up in the darndest places sometime. Well, now let's get back to Nancy's breakfast table, and I had another question for Glen Kilgour.
When's the last time you got bucked off?
Oh, I don't know, quite a while ago now. The worst is that when I was riding, I didn't buck off easy. I usually had to torture myself quite a bit before.
Sometimes it's more painful staying on.
But I think now, if I bucked off, I'd break into 100 pieces, maybe. Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't know. Sometimes I get on a horse and I feel good. You know, I feel like I could go, but sometimes I get on and I'm stiff or something. I don't know what it is. Yeah, that's a bad feeling. But and the reason that I don't ride colts anymore, it isn't that the colts bother me. It's that I'm lazy. To ride a colt, you can't be lazy. you're always have something to do.
Oh yeah.
You know, you're doing this, you're
always making adjustments and correcting.
You're correct, constantly. So, and once you get lazy, then you want to ride a horse that, when you start him off in that direction. That's the way he's going to go.
Stays right between them.
But I kind of was lazy all my life. One time we heard a fellow over there in that BC country. We used to. The Alberta cowboys and the BC cowboys didn't see eye to eye, you know, and we thought we were always better cowboys than anybody that was ever raised in the world. This BC cowboy said he was, how did that go? He was too lazy to work, and he was too afraid to steal, so he had to cowboy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, coming up, Baxter Black looks at the consequences of trying to save the West when the Spirit of the West continues right after this.
Howdy, friends. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan, and I'll be right back after this with a little peek at the vanishing East.
Your land is a legacy, a challenge from those who tended it before you to build on their foundations. At Corteva Agriscience, we understand what it means to be the stewards of a legacy. We embrace the challenge of building on the foundation of Dow AgroSciences to maintain your trust, to bring new solutions, to help you care for your land. See how we can help build your legacy at rangeandpasture.com.
And for our Canadian listeners, just check corteva.ca, the Canadian website.
I received a letter from a journalist. She included several self-penned poems that wistfully celebrated the mountains, the big sky, and the cowboy. She said she was chronicling the vanishing West. I thought to myself, does that mean that the East has already vanished? And at what point did it happen? When the Indians sold Manhattan? When Kentucky became a state? When the Cleveland Indians won the World Series in 1954? And how does something like the East vanish? Can it be blown off the face of the earth by a tornado, get eaten by locust hordes, or covered up like a landfill? Carrying this thought forward, it is just a short philosophical step from chronicling the vanishing West to saving it, except that the ideas rise proportionally to preposterous on the lunatic scale. There are those who have proposed depopulating the Great Plains from Colorado to North Dakota and establishing a buffalo common. There are others who support draining Lake Powell. However, saving the West almost always entails eliminating any type of private enterprise like cattle or timber or mining or fast food franchises. And according to the advocates, people should only be allowed to live in places like Flagstaff, Missoula, Aspen, or Palm Springs, and only if they can be supplied essentials from elsewhere, like living in Antarctica. But is it still possible to save the East? By definition, that would mean it should be returned to its pre-Pilgrim state. This would involve removing all commerce from the Chesapeake Bay and the Boston Harbor, eliminate those preying on tourists in Atlantic City and Nantucket, reintroducing mountain lions, wolves, and grizzly bears in Gettysburg, Albany, and Washington, D.C., planting endangered species in Lake Ontario, and establishing a plover and seagull commons on Long Island, a massive undertaking. So, has the East really vanished? Or should my journalistic pen pal retreat to Baltimore to do her chronicling while there's still time? And more importantly, can we still save the East, or must we be stoic, keep one eye pointed toward the sunset, and march on, lest we glance back like Lot's wife and turn into a pillar of salt? This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West.
We got our first significant fall of snow back on October 23rd, which is about a month ahead of normal for around here. And I wonder what that sound was. Turns out it was my neighbor. As soon as he looked out his door, he said, "Not much can raise your stress level more than a tractor breakdown when you need it most. We've all spent hours on the phone and driving around trying to find the right parts. And that's no fun when you're missing something you need to finish the job. Here's a better way. Just go to bctractorparts.com. That's where you can find about any part for any make of tractor. If you're restoring a vintage tractor or just keeping up the maintenance on the ones you're using, you can have the parts you need in a short time. And you know what? There's some great pictures of tractor restoration projects and much more right there at bctractorparts.com. What? Oh, you don't have internet? Well, try calling Mark at 250-395-0960. On October the 20th, not very long ago, another great Canadian country music performer rode across the Great Divide, and I'm sure many of you remember Danny Mac. His Cement City Cowboys, and then a little later his group was called Alberta Crude. He played in clubs and bars and stages all over the world, and Danny had been living in Australia, courageously battling several serious health issues. And I had a lot of fun sharing a few stages with him over the years. He wrote and recorded piles of great country rock songs, but this simple song about cowboy life was one of my favorites. Just Danny Mac and his guitar.
As the wind blows at your back, and if you ride till sundown, you might make the old line shack. And if your luck runs with you, and the fence ain't all torn down, you'll be sitting by that line shack stove and swilling coffee down. That's the life of a cowboy, out on the line, with the coyotes howling, and the night owls crying. Oh, it must be some feeling in this day and age to live the life of a cowboy who makes his home on the range. As you do your cowboy thing, the snow's down off the mountains, and it's round up in the spring. And if you'd arrived in Dogies off the hills before sundown, well, it's Friday night and the moon is bright, and you just might get to town. That's the life of a cowboy, out on the line, with the coyotes howling, and the night owls crying. Oh, it must be some feeling in this day and age to live the life of a cowboy who makes his home on the range. Oh, it must be some feeling in this day and age to live the life of a cowboy who makes his home on the range.
The Rangeland News from the Spirit of the West, a roundup of issues and events from the world of agriculture.
At the top of page 1, it says this story has been somewhat overshadowed by the U.S. election, the World Series, and that other story. What was it again? Oh, yeah, something about a pandemic. Anyway, quietly behind the scenes, work has been going on to put men on Mars. And the plan is that they would spend long enough to have to grow some of their own food. Really? Okay, but what about pests that might stow away on the spacecraft? Well, Gary Crawford's been looking into it for us.
Space, the final frontier. We will establish a foundation for an eventual mission to Mars,
which would take 6 months to get there, 2 years on Mars until the alignment of Earth and Mars would allow the return to Earth. Experts say the crew would have to grow most of their food, but what happens if a crop-eating, destroying insect pest ends up hitchhiking on the ship, reproduces, starts destroying the crops? USDA entomologist Dr. David Shapiro-Ilan says the answer may be bringing along tiny roundworms called nematodes, some of which attack insects.
So that way you don't have to rely on chemical insecticides floating around with you in space. You can have these natural methods.
But can these nematodes do their thing in space? A few months ago,
we sent these nematodes to the space station to test whether or not they would function normally under the conditions of microgravity.
And the little worms performed perfectly, so they might someday go where no worm has gone before. Gary Crawford reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Many of you have admired, I'm sure, the beautiful Western photography of Kim Taylor. She has compiled incredibly beautiful photographs from ranches all over the West, and she does it right, and she's a fine cowgirl herself. Her photographs have been featured on the cover of magazines like Western Horseman, American Cowboy, Canadian Cowboy Country, Western Horse Review, Legion, and many, many more. Her annual On the Trail Daybook calendars have been a part of many folks' desktops for over 15 years, and recently Kim was the victim of a pretty bad horse wreck. A beaver dam that she rode across collapsed, and she wound up underneath her horse, resulting in a broken neck and fractured ribs and a broken wrist and head injuries. And she's had to face a lot of unforeseen expenses. Now, one way folks have come together to help is with a Facebook Live fundraising concert. Now, if you're hearing this on Saturday, it happens live at 7 o'clock tonight with two great entertainers, Ryan Fritz and Ben Crane. And you can get the links to it at their websites, bencrane.com and Ryan Fritz, F-R-I-T-Z, or Z.net. Now, if you're hearing this after Saturday, it will still be archived, and you'll still be able to watch it, enjoy it, and contribute. Now, those websites, again, are bencrane.com and ryanfritz.net. Some of our neighbors have been receiving decent prices for their calves this fall, and according to some analysts, the calf market will likely remain flat through this November. After December, calves that come on the market generally have the option to be put out for grass next spring or moved to a finishing lot, depending on their weights and fleshiness. The calf market during the spring of 2021 is expected to reach back up to the 52-week highs. Organizers of the Alberta Beef Industry Conference have announced the postponement of that annual event until March 2022, given the uncertainty this pandemic has created. The 17-year-old event is one of the country's largest beef conventions and trade shows, and the 2020 conference was held in early March in Red Deer, and that was just as Alberta was reporting its first coronavirus case. There's a calf and a yearling and regular cattle sale scheduled for November the 10th at the BC Livestock Kamloops Yards, and then on November 11th, the calf sale at the Williams Lake Yards and the regular Williams Lake cattle sale on the 12th, and a bred cow sale and a heifer sale at the Vanderhoof Yards on November 13th. Get the details and see the sales streaming live at bclivestock.bc.ca. Meanwhile, our good friends the Danes family out at the Innisfail Auction Market say they're continuing the pre-sort calf sales on Mondays. Of course, regular cattle sales every Wednesday, and starting on November 27th, bred cow and heifer sales on Fridays. And you can get all the details at InnisfailAuctionMarket.com. And that takes us down to the final item. And you know, there really seems to be paranoia at times over the new rules and regulations for going out in public, and some suspicions about a conspiracy. And a friend of mine says he got the evidence to prove it. Really? He said, yeah, don't let them take your temperature when you go into a store. It's a scam. What they're really doing is erasing your memory. He says, I went in for bread and milk, and I came out with 6 bottles of wine. And that's the Rangeland News. Coming up in the Urban Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File, There are some situations you might find yourself in where your horse is way out of his comfort zone, and that's what I'll talk about. And there's another one of Glen Kilgour's recollections when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. I've talked with quite a few riders who thought that they had a pretty solid, well-broke horse, but they found themselves in some situations where the horse is really giving them some trouble. And that's what I'm going to talk about on the Urban Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File, and I think you're just in time.
Now it's time for the Horse Training File, brought to you by Irvine Tack and Western Wear, Canada's largest Western store.
788, 789.
What you up to?
I'm counting all the saddles here at Irvine Tack and Western Wear. Rumor has it they have over 1,400.
Well, they are Canada's largest Western store with over 100,000 square feet of selection, Western wear with a welcome twist, and so many saddles you'll likely lose count.
700 and... wait, where was I?
See what I mean?
Ugh. One saddle, two saddles.
Saddle up for Irvine's today. Exit 305 off Highway 2 by Crossfield.
Canada's largest Western store.
And you probably know this already. It's a lot of fun shopping online at irvinsaddles.ca from wherever you are. Now, some things to consider when you're taking your horse away beyond his comfort zone for the first time. A listener had thoughts that his horse would be just fine. He'd ridden him out on the trails for a couple of weeks and the horse was pretty quiet, so he didn't think there'd be a problem when he went along at a friend's invitation to gather about 300 cows and calves from a big range permit. There would be about 10 other riders along, and he said, boy, did I get a surprise. From the time he unloaded the 7-year-old gelding, he was a different horse. The pressure of the other horses that he'd never seen before, and the commotion and noise of 300 cows and calves had this horse pretty much wired all day long. And after the first half hour, he was in a lather, not so much from exertion, but from stress. And another couple who'd ridden together on the same 2 horses for a long time thought they'd go along on a trail ride with about 35 other riders. The country was beautiful. She was riding a 10-year-old gelding, and he was on a 7-year-old, supposedly well-broke mare. This was the first time that they'd taken these 2 on a ride with other horses. Well, that herd dynamic has a huge influence on how a horse will feel in many ways. The ride was no fun for them, especially for her. Every time another rider came near his wife's mare, his horse would pin his ears, whirl around, and do whatever he could to drive the strange horse away. Fortunately, his kicks didn't connect with any other horses or riders, but they could have. The gelding's behavior really isn't that unnatural or unusual. He's just following his natural instincts and protecting his pasture mate, a mare, from all these strangers that he'd never seen before. Now, the good news is most horses can overcome this kind of herd behavior when they're being ridden in a group with enough exposure to it. I've got a mare whose report card early on said she doesn't play well with others, doesn't mix well. And boy, for about 3 years, I had to watch her closely when we were riding in a group. But now I can use her to settle down another rider's horse when he's having trouble getting on, and just throw her in the trailer with a bunch of other loose horses that she's never seen before, and she can handle it. But boy, in the first couple of years, I'd never chanced doing that. And for Urban Saddles and Western Wear, that's the Horse Training File. That horse and all the rest of ours get a daily feeding of Hoffman's Horse Ration. And you can find out what's in it and why it works so well at hoffmanshorseproducts.com. The way the Canada Revenue Agency deals with ranchers and farmers has changed a lot in the last few years, and the financial decisions we make today can have a long-lasting impact on our bottom line far into the future. It really helps to have a trusted professional who really understands your situation to guide you with all your accounting requirements and your tax preparation. Having an accountant who knows the difference between a Hereford and a heifer, what a slick and backgrounding are, and that Alfalfa and Timothy are not just names from a storybook, really helps. Kathy McMillan of PMT Chartered Professional Accountants understands the intricacies of specialized programs like Agri-Stability and Agri-Invest. She understands the demands on your time and can help you spend more time doing your job and less time dealing with endless piles of paperwork. See PMTaccountants.com or call toll-free 877-383-8081. Glen Kilgour has a great story about the greatest bronc ride he ever made, and it involves a lamb and a burlap sack. Something like this story from Cowboy Joe and the Babcocks.
I came into town on a Saturday morning. The work at the ranch was all done. The boys at the ground were all gathered around, just looking to have a little fun. My friend Ray Morley put up $50 to the man that could ride his paint mare. I took him up 'cause I'd never been throwed. I could ride anything with hair. They roped that old mare and they brought her to me. She was raring and a kick in the air. Ray was a chuckling and holding his mouth as they tried to saddle up that old mare. I eased myself up, got a foot in the stirrup, when just like a bomb she exploded. From the chute like a rocket on the 4th of July, this bronc that was dynamite loaded. She twisted and turned, she kicked and she turned up the dust till it looked like a battle. She spun and she hooked and she bit my left foot, tried to pull me right out of the saddle. She jumped the stockade and she went off running, headed for a low-hanging branch. She was doing her best just to kill me for sure, send me back in a box to the ranch. She ran through a thicket of blackberry bushes, my clothes were all tattered and torn. When finally she stopped in a little green meadow, it looked like I'd been through a war. When all of a sudden she reared over backwards, I knew we were both coming down. I hit the dirt with that horse right on top of me, mashing me into the ground. As they took me away, I heard old Ray say, Joe rode that horse to the last. I woke up on Tuesday in room 203, all covered with plaster and cast. My shoulder was broken, my chest was caved in, and something was wrong with my spleen. My ankle was shattered, I had a concussion, and my foot was turning green. I asked old Ray, did I total your horse? He said, Joe, she ain't got a scratch. I thought I was gonna be riding a bronc, instead it was a wrestling match. So son, if you're gonna be riding wild horses, this lesson I've found to be true. If you're gonna break horses, it's better to fall off than to let that horse ride you.
Cowboy Joe Babcock. Actually, he sang the harmony on so many of those Marty Robbins gunfighter ballads and trail songs, and he actually wrote quite a few of them for Marty. Now, a lot of us wish that Glen Kilgour had written a book before he passed on. He could fill it with hundreds of colorful cowboy adventures, and there at the breakfast table, he shared this one with us.
But then, you know, all my best cowboying that I ever did, I was alone, too.
I know, yeah,
And one time I tell about going over to a neighbor's where we lived down in Alberta to help banding day, and they had a few sheep, and they had a ewe that had died, and here was, they had an extra lamb, you see, and I had a little boy about that big. So I thought, of course, that little lamb would be. They asked, would I take the lamb? And I thought about this boy, and I thought, of course, that boy would like that lamb. So I said, yes, I'd take the lamb. Well, this day I thought, I'll put it in a gunny sack, you see, and carry it a horseback. And I was riding a colt at that time. I went along fine, and I found out if I put that lamb in my saddle like that on top of my lap, that it would blat. Oh. But if I carried it out to the side like that, the thing was quiet. And this blatting didn't go over so good with my colt, but anyway, I'm going along holding it out like this, and And I maintain this is the greatest ride I ever did in my whole life. We go down in the creek, and this colt wanted to have a drink out of this creek, so that was all right. Everything was fine. Only thing with the stopping and standing, this lamb give a big blat out there like that. Well, holy cow. This colt bogged its head, and away we went, and we really went that time. And I had to keep this lamb from getting killed, you know. And I had to,
one hand in the sack, nothing much going on.
Talk about a cowboy, and this is my finest cowboy, because I didn't have to I couldn't reach for a horn, I couldn't do nothing, only just ride this horse. And there I was, you know.
I'd have dropped that lamb first thing when I was in the creek. I didn't care no matter where. Bye-bye. Oh, man.
But I had no audience.
A little while ago on the Rangeland News, I talked about Kim Taylor's horse wreck, and Ryan Fritz and his family have been featured in quite a few of Kim's photos. And I think that probably inspired Ryan to write this song about Kim, and I'm pretty sure that if folks will pledge a suitable amount for Kim, Ryan will do this one on the Facebook Live show with Ben Crane.
With the camera in her hand, she's out there on the land, working with the cowboys, riding for the brand. If you were to ask, she'd just say it's her task, photographing moments that soon will be our past. And she shoots the west and captures the way the west look today. And no one knows when this life might go to rest, so she shoots the west. She shoots the west. It's the early morning sun and the dusk when they're done, working herds horseback, a family tradition, a heading home cow track or a springtime mountain pass, the solitude of prairie and the pride in the grass. Oh, she shoots the west and captures the way the west look today. And no one knows when this life might go to rest, so she shoots the west. She shoots the west and captures the way the west look today. No one knows when this life might go to rest, so she shoots the west. Oh, she shoots the west.
Still to come is this week's classic Song of the West, and the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight features Randy Riemann and an all-time favorite when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. This week's classic Western song comes from a cassette that Dave Stamey recorded back in 1994. Fine version of Billy Hill's Prairie Lullaby.
Shadows slowly creeping down the prairie trail. Everything is sleeping. Ah, but the nightingale moon will soon be climbing in the purple sky. Night winds all are humming this tender lullaby. Cares of the day have fled my little sleepy head. Stars are in the sky. Time that the prayers were said, my little sleepy head to a tender lullaby. Saddle up your pony, Sandman's here to guide you down the trail of dreams. Tumble in bed, my child, my little sleepy head to a prairie lullaby. Hey. Saddle up your pony, Sandman's here to guide you down the trail of dreams. Tumble in bed, my child, my little sleepy head to a prairie lullaby. Hey, oh, hey, oh,
And we will close the gate on this one with Randy Riemann.
You know, probably one of the most popular poems to be recited at the gatherings over the last dozen years or so is a poem written by Bruce Kiskadden. It's certainly one of Bruce's best poems, and it's one of my favorites. It's actually one of the first poems I committed to memory. It's called When You Finished Shipping Cattle in the Fall. Well, you're not exactly blue, but you don't feel like you do in the winter nor on long hot summer days. Still, your feelings and the weather seem to sort of go together, and you're quiet in that dreamy autumn haze. When that last big steer is goaded up the chute and safely loaded, and the summer crew has ceased to hit the ball, and the feller starts to drag him to the home ranch with the wagon, for he's finished shipping cattle in the fall. Well, there's just two men left a-standin' on this job for winter's brandin'. Your partner, he's a-loafin' at your side. He's got a brand-new saddle creakin'. Neither one of you is speakin', and you feel it's gonna be a silent ride. But you savvy one another, see you know him like a brother. Oh, he's friendly. He's just quiet, that is all. And he's thinkin' as he's draggin' to the home ranch with the wagon, for he's finished shippin' cattle in the fall. and the saddle horses stringing in an easy walk, a-swinging in behind the old chuck wagon, moving slow. Now they're weary, gaunt, and jaded from the mud and brush they've waded, and they settled down to business long ago. Not a horse is feeling snorty, not one horse is acting sporty. In the spring the brutes was full of buck and ball, but now they're gentle as they're dragging to the home ranch with the wagon, for they finished shipping cattle in the fall. And the cook leads the retreat. He's up there on his wagon seat. He's got his hat pulled away down on his head. He used to make that old team hustle. Now he hardly moves a muscle, and a feller might imagine he was dead. 'Cept his old cob pipes a-smokin' as he lets that team go pokin', hittin' every hump and holler in the road. No, the cookie ain't been drinkin', he's just sittin' up there thinkin' 'bout the people and the places that he knowed. Well, you can see the dust a-trailin', 2 little clouds a-sailin' like a big mirage with lakes and timbers tall. Well, it's lonesome when you're draggin' to the home ranch with the wagon and you finish shipping cattle in the fall. Well, you make your camp that night, and though the fire's burning bright, it seems nobody really has a lot to say. In the spring you sung and hollered. Now you get your supper swallered and you crawl into your blankets right away. You see the stars a-shinin' up there in that soft blue linin'. You sniff the frosty night air, clear and cool. You hear your night horse shiftin', and your memory goes to driftin' to that little village where you went to school, with its narrow gravel streets and the kids you used to meet and the commons where you used to play baseball. But now you're far away and draggin' to the home ranch with the wagon, for you finish shippin' cattle in the fall. And your schoolboy sweetheart, too, with her eyes of honest blue. Best performer in the hometown talent show. Well, you was nothing but a kid, and yet you loved her. Yeah, you did. Now that's been nearly 30 years ago. Well, your memory starts to roam from old Mexico to Nome, from the Rio Grande up to the Powder River, and you think of things you done, and some of them was lots of fun. But there are other things that make you shiver. Like that boy, his name was Reed. He got killed in a stampede. It was way up north. You helped to dig his grave. And your old friend Jim, the boss, he got tangled with his hoss, and the fellas couldn't reach in time to save. And you was there when Ed got his'n. Boy that killed him still in prison. Old Lucky George, he's rich and livin' high. Poor old Tom come off the worst. He broke his legs and died of thirst. God, that must have been an awful way to die. But there was winters at the ranches and them old-time country dances. Everybody there was sociable and gay. We used to lead 'em down the middle just a prancin' to the fiddle. Never thought of going home till break of day. Well, there ain't much chance for sleepin' when these memories come a-creepin', and sometimes you think you hear old voices call, when you're far away and draggin' to the home ranch with the wagon, and you finished shippin' cattle in the fall. Bruce Kiskadden.
Thanks again for riding along, and I sure hope you can join us right here next week at the same time. Thanks to Mark and Kathy, our great support crew. Check our website at hugh-mclennan.com, and till next week, I'm Hugh McLennan. Hope to see you down the trail somewhere real soon.